Tempted. Okay, I got the thumbs up. We're ready to go. Everybody's in their place? Okay, I appreciate you being here this morning. Oh, we got a visitor. Two visitors. Carlisle's. They're still dragging from their trip, you know. Look at him walk. Look at that. Just strolling. Okay. Yeah. That's like when I ask a question, someone says Jesus. You know, it's always right. You know, right? Okay. Epistle of James. Does anyone remember what I believe the theme is, the theme verse of James? Remember, this is the third week to approach this, so, you know, I've hammered this 2 weeks, 2 weekends. Okay. There you go. Mona gets the prize. I have a piece of gum here. You want some gum? Okay. Yeah, it's, if you look, James 5, we'll start in verse 19. Interestingly enough, a lot of times when you try to, it's a guess based upon the structure and the theme, of course, of books, but usually there's a statement, a verse that is the theme passage, I guess, in which everything revolves around in most of the letters and even in the Gospels. And so in my study of James or whatever, it seems to make sense that he's leading to a crescendo. It's almost, if we look at it as wisdom literature in the New Testament, I think the Proverbs 31 is the crescendo of the book of Proverbs, the virtuous woman that is talked about, because the way Proverbs is set up, you know, you have these, you have Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly, that is the, you know, antithesis of each other all the way through the book of Proverbs, and then we come out with the virtuous woman. So Lady Wisdom wins the day, and one who embraces wisdom is one who has figured out life. Fear God, that's the beginning of wisdom, but embracing wisdom as a part of your life is what I think the virtuous woman set of scriptures is all about. And I think James is leading to that crescendo when he writes the 12 tribes that are dispersed, that he is he's exhorting and encouraging them in their challenges in being faithful to God, that this is our primary purpose, is to be faithful and to live out God's purpose in our lives, no matter where we are, no matter where we've been dispersed. And so if there's anyone who has strayed from that way, then it is incumbent upon us to retrieve them and bring them back. And so we have verse 19, my brethren, if any among you strays from the truth, notice any among you strays from the truth, and one turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. So in a sense, we have the opposite. We have being lost and being saved, even among the challenges that Christians face. No one can snatch us out of the hand of God. No one. There's no one that can snatch us out of God's hand. But we can choose to leap out of it. And so there's that challenged from whatever trials and temptation, money problems, the social situation that the early Christians were facing, that challenges the fidelity of each of those family units and individuals in their faithfulness to God. So James is very much talking about two ways of dealing with this crisis that people are facing who are dispersed. We talked about, we began the right way in dealing with these challenges. I should have had it reversed probably and ended on the positive note instead of ending on the negative. But, God's desire for all of us is what we would identify as single-mindedness. In James and in the Bible itself, I think even in Matthew, when we are to be perfect as God is perfect, people, I guess, have a difficult time in accepting that because we're not perfect. But that's not what it's talking about. It's not talking about sinlessness. It's talking about the perfection of coming to maturity and producing fruit. That's the idea. Everything grows for a purpose. Every plant will grow for its purpose. Every fruit tree, its purpose. And that is the analogy that we as human beings, we grow to a purpose. And realizing that purpose, of course, is incumbent upon us to be single-minded. And there's going to be the opposite of that in James when he talks about double-mindedness. And so single-mindedness means a maturity, complete. It's like what I think the passage that we all love, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, the blood of Christ cleanses us from all our sins. And so you see the condition, if we walk in the light. Right after that, he says, let no one say, that he's not sin or he can't sin or whatever. We have in those who sin, if we would confess, he is just and righteous to do what? To forgive us of our sins. So it's not the presumption that we will not sin. We will be perfect. The presumption is that we'll walk in the light. As we walk in the light, sometimes we trip. We get off course a little bit or whatever, but the choice is to walk in the light. That's different from willful sin. Willful sin is a jumping out of the light. That's what the book of Hebrews talks about. For those who were about to throw in the towel and give up on Christ, they are going to be cruising the Son of God afresh. They're going to tread on all of that gospel plan of salvation. They're calling it, none effect. Now, there's another metaphor or image, a sow after being washed turns back to the mud, and the dog which this analogy is very well known and loved. A dog, regurgitates and then he comes back to it and eats it up. That is the image of one who willfully decides to not walk in the light. Willful sin is the lifestyle. It's the chosen to go away from God. Walking in the light is not a demand for perfection. It's a demand of living under and within the grace of God and the blood cleansing us from our sins. So see, there's the presumption that we need constant cleansing, right? One who walks in the light as he is in the light. What does the blood of Christ do? It continually cleanses us. Well, why, if we're perfect, do we need a continual cleansing? See, does it make sense? So James is encouraging the idea of single-mindedness and maturity to bring forth our fruit. And of course, the fruit of the Spirit, of course, is as Paul would say in Galatians, the goal. Love and joy, peace, all those good things that we are to bring forth. That's our purpose. We're growing to bring forth that fruit, you see, ultimately. Every good gift and perfect gift comes from above, from God. The law that God gives is a perfect one that makes us free. It's kind of an irony that we think law binds us or enslaves us. But law is there actually to do what? Make us free, protect us. It's a concept that's difficult because in our age today, I always find it interesting. People want to be free and they don't want anything to restrict them, and then they find themselves in all these kinds of behaviors and chemicals, lifestyles, whatever, that they're enslaved to. And yeah, I'd never think about Christianity because y'all have all the rules, and you restrict people, and I can't do this and I can't do that, and yet they think they can do everything, see, without any consequence. And it's the wise person who understands, I believe, as God would say, that, we don't want to walk as close to the line as we can. We could slip and fall over. We want to stay away and live in the land of the free. God's freedom. The way that God has designed the universe and life and all that. Faith is made perfect by our deeds or works. I don't know. Maybe it's the word works that bothers people. Because, you work and you receive wages is the idea. But I like the word deeds. It doesn't have that connotation to it. Either one of those words is fine, but I think we've been so hung up on the idea of works righteousness, I think in religious discussions here in, our nation and past. And so anything that has to do with works, there's always a pushback. Yeah, you're not earning, we're not earning our salvation. Well, it's a straw man. Hello? Yeah, that's James, see? James is talking to us. Technology, huh? You gotta love it. It's fine. It was neat that James actually, was talking to us there. So, the idea of works being construed as something earned instead of something that flows from what has been given already. It's not. It comes out of a different motive. It's not that I work to earn my salvation. I actually work as a result of my salvation. It's backwards. We can't earn our salvation. Paul makes that very clear. Every book of the Bible makes that very clear. But we don't need to construe that obedience or doing a work or deed is somehow understood as earning things. Faithfulness is a requirement. It's something that's a part of being of faith, is to be faithful. But we are motivated by what we have gained and received already. We should, I think, to a certain extent in our development, in our maturity, the works is a result of love, to please the one who has saved us. So, but there's always that connotation anytime. That's why some say in regard to baptism is not essential because, it's a work, or the Bible calls belief a work. You know, um, there's somehow a false dichotomy or something where people in their head in religious institutions have talked about or against works righteousness so much that it's ingrained in the mind of people that nothing is required once you accept Jesus into your heart, as if now I can do anything I want to. Well, Paul would say in Romans 6, what? God forbid. For the person who has been buried with Christ has put to death the old person of sin. How can we then allow that old person to come back to life through us and live, immorally and all that? See, that's the flaw of the once saved, always saved type of mentality. That's what I think is a false narrative. Now, once saved, always saved in the Bible is, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, the blood of Christ, what? Continues to cleanse. That's once saved, always saved, isn't it? But a person can decide at any time, based upon temptation, choices, to leap right out of the hand of God and say, I don't want anything else to do with this Christ thing. And there have been people who have done that. Well, that's willful sin. See, they've chosen a lifestyle of unbelief now, rejection, that condemns them. This is what James is trying to halt, because there's always that temptation when challenges become very personal and trying, that there's the temptation from Satan to throw in the towel of your Christianity and go back to what you know, as if that is the answer. And to be sure, one does bring upon themselves probably extra challenges they would not have normally have to endure if they never became a Christian. Right? So here's these Christians that are scattered, and not by choice do they want to be persecuted or whatever, face the things that they're facing, but by commitment they have to, because they're committed to Christ. And so they need some encouragement. There are some that are falling away, and there's this motivation and push to bring them back. There's been, every congregation that I have been a part of have had individuals who have strayed from the truth. They have strayed. And it's not that all of a sudden they were a Christian one day and then they rejected that the next day. The idea of straying is a process. It's like over time, it's how fast the weeks go, it seems. We'll have Sunday, and Monday will be here, it'll be new week of work and all that, and it'll be Sunday again. And you go, well, where did the week go? And I'm a week older. Now, you can't tell, but if you saw a picture when I first came 2 years ago, and now a picture of me now, I might look a little bit different, okay, because I've strayed. In other words, my age has changed. Well, that's the idea of straying. You don't notice it like right now, or maybe a particular activity that you're doing or what you're thinking, but you can tell in the trajectory that it's not leading to God, it's leading away. And so that's where we need to recognize things. It may not be dangerous now. This is the challenge that the elders always have, and why they move so slowly sometimes on decisions. As a preacher, we're always, man, would they make up their decision? How come we can't do this? We have all these ideas. David and me and other ministers, youth ministers, let's do this. We're waiting for the decision. What are the elders doing? Well, first of all, they have a lot of other things that they're doing that's more important than the preacher's ideas. Okay. Uh, the other thing is they have to weigh the trajectory of what this will be encouraging. And so that's why a lot of times they make the decisions that they do that seem right now, oh man, I remember when I was a youth minister, I'd get so upset because the elders said no to something. I mean, oh man, I can't, da 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 da, and all upset and talk to this and that. And now that I'm older, I go, man, what a dummy I was, and certainly glad of having wise, leaders in the church who can sniff out things that are going to be problematic down the road. Now, that's what we have to do as individuals as well, is when the Bible talks about preachers, correcting and rebuking and things of that nature, what we're mandated to do is not only for us to see the direction in which we're heading, but be able to sound the alarm, for us to think about what it is that God wants us to do. It's not just all with a great idea, it has to do with faithfulness to his way. Faith is made perfect by works. Notice this. This is why James is called a right strawy. What is it, David? A strawy epistle. Martin Luther, because it didn't fit with his Calvinistic, type of thinking, because there was so much on works and it wasn't on faith alone. Alone. And so when you come to James, and James says it's not by faith alone, you can see why that's a contradiction to what he wanted, because he had a preconceived idea that he was trying, that he thought he saw.
It's not Martin Luther King, the civil rights leader.
Right. Martin Luther. So the issue is, how do you know if someone loves? Because they say it? Well, there's a lot of men and women at their wedding ceremony who say they love each other. 10, 20 years later. So what, the idea of love is an expression, it's a behavior, it's an action. That's what confirms it, not just continuing to say, words can be good, but in the final analysis, they're cheap. People can say anything to get out of anything, So think of politicians and their double speak, and depending, their platitudes and how they cater to whoever they're, I'm not saying all of them, but we know political talk. Well, that's what it is. Yeah. Talk. Talk is nothing unless it is reinforced by what? Action. And that's what James is talking about. That's what faith is. Faith is not sterile and lived in a vacuum. There's no way that faith cannot evidence itself in actions. There's just no way. Because it is the works that flow from faith are natural and connected to that commitment. So that's why your works can be telltale signs of your commitment to the Lord. or at least give you an evaluation of how strong your faith is. So, according to James, he speaks about our faith being perfected by works, deeds. The perfection, again, in James is that of coming to fruit. So, it's very important to not talk a good game, but actually to live a good game talks a good game. Our desires should be perfect. Look at chapter 3, verse 2. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well. Now, if we put the bits into the horse's mouth so that they will obey us, we direct their entire body as well. Look at the ships also, though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, are still directed by a very small rudder wherever the inclination of the pilot desires. So also the tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. Now the question is, he's obviously indicating that what we say, okay, is very powerful for good or for evil. All right? And all the illustrations that he uses, who is in control of that rudder of life, that tongue? Who's in control of it? You are. See, the pilot is. The one who puts the bridle on the horse and rides it, see, what does he do with the horse? Steers it, makes it go. The rudder on a ship, you know, it's a little bitty thing. When you compare it to the whole of the ship, it turns it. So the tongue, the speech, is probably, James has a lot to say about speech. So does the book of Proverbs. One who is able to control their speech is one who avoids a lot of stumbling. So let me ask you something. How many times have you said something that you regretted? How many times have you said something that hurt somebody? Oh, you didn't mean to, but you said it anyway. See how the speech and tongue, all that is, it's kind of set against our bodies, as James says. You know, it's the wild, you know, body member that, you know, you got to jump on it, you know, get it in line. It's very hard because I would say, most of the issues between human beings is often because of what was said, and how it was said, the way it was said, you know, the contents of it. How much bitterness is there among people over the words of someone? It's hard to forget. So we're to strive. There's that word striving. You know, striving has the connotation. You know, you're striving. You're never perfect, but you continue to work on it. So yeah, I make mistakes in my speech or in my life, but my trajectory is God. See, I can be forgiven of those things. I confess those things. I walk in the light. That's all a part of it. I don't ever want to decide phooey with it all and leave God. That's leaving the truth, leaving faith. Okay, here's the wrong way of dealing with things. So we've looked at the right way. The wrong way is evident. It's double-mindedness. And I see myself so much in this in a lot of ways. Um, Pull in two different directions, double-minded is kind of like, um, what's the fear of committing all? Hmm? Yeah. You ever kind of reach that point in your life, what if I really committed to this? uh, in all things, whether my giving, my prayer life, um, uh, reaching out to people, what would it be like? Just imagine right now, what would it be like if I really committed to this? What would change? Um, what what kind of quote unquote risks would I take if I really believed it? Not saying that we don't, but you get the idea. It's kind of play it safe. The second clock, the second hand is going so fast. Well, it was. That was weird. Okay, that thing was going like that. So I don't know if that's a hurry up, get on with it. It's gonna. That's the clock doing that, and people do this, and you know. Okay. So we often display a distracted life. That's double-mindedness. Distraction. We're unstable, therefore, in all of our ways. Think about it. So look at James chapter 1, 6 through 8. We'll start in verse 5. But if any one of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without any doubting, for the one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man ought not to expect that he will receive anything from the Lord. Why? Being double-minded, unstable in all of his ways. It's like, I don't know, when I was a kid, they might have two floaties in the water, and I'm trying to stand on both of them in the water, instead of, it'd be hard on one, but do you see the idea of trying to do two? We're the ones that make the ground unstable, because we're not single-minded, we're double-minded. So if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God without what? Doubting. Well, what does it mean to doubt here?
When you go to God in prayer and you're asking God for something, in your mind you're thinking, I'm not getting this. There's no way in the world I'm going to get this. That's the thing I have learned over the short life that I've lived, that when you pray, if you really believe that God can answer your prayer, you need to pray like you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it. Because God may answer nothing, but he's going to answer your prayer. It's up to him.
Yeah.
Believe that he can do it.
Yeah. So David was saying that doubting has to do with, we got to believe when we pray, and not doubt. We got to believe that God is hearing, God will answer. When things begin to happen, when we believe. But it's really hard to arrive at that state of belief. It's something easy to talk about, but in our own life, it can be a very challenging task. How bad do you want wisdom? Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Right, right. The idea of praying and expressing confidence is to accept God's will in the matter, that He will answer us, but it may not be the answer that we want.
The song we sometimes sing, count your many blessings, name them one by one.
Yeah, 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 yeah. When Peter was released from prison, they went to John Mark's house, and the door was answered, and was it Rhoda that screamed? It's like, oh, it goes. No one's answering. Then they went to tell the disciples, and oh, you foolish woman, you know. Yeah. So there's, I think there's a challenge. Belief and faith are not. It's really something that's, I don't know how to express this, the antithesis of what we really want to do. Um, but when we go all in, which that's the way it should be, things begin to happen in our lives and around the people with whom we associate. Look at James 4 and verse 8. Starting in verse 7, it says, "Submit therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will do what? Draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be miserable and mourn and weep. Laughter turn into mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the presence of the Lord, and he will exalt you." Again, I think a lot of this has to do with wisdom literature. There's something good about going to a funeral for us. The book of Ecclesiastes would say that's a good thing. It's better to go to a funeral than to a party. Why? Yeah, you seem to be more sober than you would at a party. Things are reality. You face reality, which he's not just saying that's all what life is, but there is a component of wisdom in that. Yes. Yeah. All right. So we often display a distracted life of double-mindedness. You notice that little rudder that came out there. I hate, and he changed it real quick. You ever done that? You come out and say something, you want to change it real quick. That's that old rudder of the tongue, see? On display. Okay. Secondly, under this, decisions that should be easy are difficult to make. Now, this is a telltale sign that one is what? Straying from the truth. When decisions that have already been determined because of faith and belief somehow become more difficult. It's not as clear. And that's just a telltale sign of how one is choosing the wrong way of handling these challenges. Look at so we have James 1 verse 6, back to wisdom here. "But if any one of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without any doubting. The one who doubts is like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind." So people who are straying from the truth, they're like, it's like indecision time. Which it's a battle between guilt and desire. And you can play that game long enough to where guilt can sort of be pushed away and desire becomes all-consuming. You do what you want to do. And so we all have those temptations. This is minor in compared to what they were facing in the first century, what James is. But we tend to do the things we want to do, desire and want can overrule guilt, what's right, what we should be doing. That's why James would say to the person who knows what to do and does not do it, to him it is what? Sin. That's in the context of what he's talking about. When desire or want supplants, the single-mindedness nature of what faith is. I mean, there should be, there's no question about worshiping God on the Lord's Day. It should never be an issue for God's people. It should never be an issue of prayer or doing what's right or serving others. Never should be an issue. It should never be an issue to seek forgiveness or apologize when you're in the wrong. These are not like, well, I don't know, it should never be an issue. It's just like it's a part of who we are as God's people. I'm not watering down all the challenges, but I think you understand what I'm talking about. Yes. Yeah, are we going to church today? Maybe it's not a question. Maybe that's a question that reveals double-mindedness more than single-mindedness. So decisions that should be easy are difficult to make. We decide to maintain spiritual appearances in order to hide our corrupt hearts. Listen to James in chapter 3, verse 14. Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds and the gentleness of his wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, and demonic. There's a little tidbit of wisdom there. What are the real issues that are going on in our minds and our life? A lot of conflict happens because we're maintaining an appearance, but we're really somewhere else and want to do something else. That can come to a head to where there's conflict. Someone who's maintaining appearances, there may be occasions in which they tip their hand about what they really want, or that there's something underneath that's troubling them, and they'll lash out, or they'll get angry about something, or they'll fight. You say, what's the real problem? You say, isn't that the issue? What's the underlying issue that's causing this over here? And human beings have a hard time keeping appearances forever. At some point, there's going to be a revealing of what one really wants. It's going to show itself. So, when we decide to maintain spiritual appearances, to hide really what's in the heart. James 4 and verse 8, seems like we just read that just a while ago. He says, draw near to God, purify your hearts, you double-minded. We boast of possessing heavenly wisdom, but we live in opposition to it. This is chapter 3, verse 13. Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and ambition among you in your heart, do not be arrogant, so lie against the truth. Once this path is chosen, okay, that is, we're straying from the truth, we're choosing this path of succumbing to the temptations or whatever, we're forfeiting God's blessing. That's the strength of James 4, verses 1 through 4. What are the quarrels among you? Is it not your own selfish ambitions? And then verse 4, you adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? Therefore, whoever makes himself a friend of the world, makes himself a friend of the world, has made himself an enemy of God. Now, that's pretty. That's a hard statement, isn't it? But notice it's on the individual. See, we can make friends with whoever we want. Making yourself a friend with the world is the antithesis of faith. So James is calling for the devoted life, single-mindedness. Hang in there, walk in the light, produce the fruit, and all will take care of itself. Thank you.